two, one. You're in this burn to read to go on this deep, book, book, book. Eggsburg and the kilo tomatoes in it.
What a that
Thanks,
is
Swedish
the
Chef.
perfect introduction.
That was Swedish Chef, everybody. He's currently getting murdered by some killer tomatoes. He tried disguising himself as one before. That didn't quite pan. Okay, that's pretty brutal. Actually, I should probably look away from that. But
This is what happens when you dress around in red face.
speaking of red face,
God. Here we go.
episode
Right out of the
102, red in the face.
How embarrassing.
So, Steven, what's the actual occasion for this episode?
Oh boy, well, it's spooky month. Everybody loves the month of October. It's fall weather. All of the basic blonde girls and their pumpkin
Spooky,
spice.
scary skeletons.
Yes, exactly. And also during this time of autumn and fall, it's Halloween. You got some scary movies. So what is the occasion? Well, we thought we'd try something different this year. We did a horror from a hat, where everybody submitted horror films that were some of their favorites. We all randomized them and tried to cobble together a coherent episode out of 3 of those randomly selected films. This is our first attempt at that, and we have 3 films with absolutely nothing in common besides the fact that someone gets a little red in the face. What that is, whether that's ketchup or blood, we'll find out. But what an episode! What a collection of film.
It's serendipitous how well this theme worked out. It's almost instant that title came to my mind when I heard these 3 films put together. Which,
and here's the thing. I mean, I really want to stress this is an absolute schizophrenic collection of films.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
So we got body horror, we've got haunted house horror, and musical involving giant vegetables. That sounds like there's a dramatic connection to me, guys.
It's funny because I don't know if you know this. You started the episode with the Swedish Chef bit. I guess we should get out of the way. We are going to be reviewing Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Ooh. Which was suggested by a friend of mine, Daniel, who is on our Discord server at Mr. D. But this was all his fault, and it's actually funny because I was watching like a documentary sort of video essay on the franchise Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, because yes, there are 4 movies total and 2 seasons of an animated series.
Wow.
For some reason.
Yes, we'll get into that.
It really squeezed the juice out on that one.
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, one of the things I read was that part of the reason this got so popular was because sometime years and years after the original film, they had a crossover between the Killer Tomatoes and the Muppet Babies.
Wow.
What?
Yes,
sorry?
We're in for quite an episode tonight. But yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm Steven Beeson. Should we introduce ourselves?
Yeah, that might help. I'm Ian Taylor. Join me tonight as my wonderful co-host, musician, artist, and talented man, Devin King. And our first guest is a man from filthy capitalist America, Steven Beeson, who was kind enough to do that little introduction. What do you do, Steven?
Capitalist Sigma male. No, I'm very, very based. No, I'm a filmmaker, independent, screenwriter. Just trying to make it in Hollywood, as they say. I made a short film about, a year or so ago now, called Hopeless Romantic, that you can find on my socials. You can pretty much find me anywhere as @BMovieMagic. I'm out there. Yeah, I've got a couple of projects that I'm working on, and can't wait to share some updates about those. But yeah, excited to be here tonight.
Fuck
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
And from the maple loving syrup communist country Canada, we
Yeah,
have
oh God.
our good friend Drew.
Hey, Drew.
Hey Drew.
It's an absolute pleasure to be back in the podcast with you guys, especially for an episode so varied. What a buffet we have in store for us.
Got some
Indeed.
ketchup, we've got
I'm-
some sex, we've got some Darth Maul looking demons.
Yep.
Can't wait. Drew,
I'm-
what are some projects you've worked on?
Next year is going to be an absolutely crazy year for me because I've worked on a bunch of television shows that have yet to come to air. So the most recent thing that I worked on that has gone on air is tragically canceled science fiction adventure show Final Space.
Huh.
And just recently, if anyone watched our Evangelion Rebuild film episode, they will have heard that I am working on I'm legally allowed to say I am working on season 2 of comedy series Clone High.
Fuck
Oh yeah, man.
Hey.
Proud of you.
Awesome. Yeah, about Final
Good
Space, real
stuff.
quick. By the way, if you're listening to this, if you have any way to find copies of Final Space online or get the word out there that they should bring this show back to streaming services, please do it. It's not perfect, but it's a great show. Everybody, including Drew, definitely worked hard on it. And it at least deserves its day in court on streaming services. I can think of 10 billion other animated shows that shouldn't be on Amazon or Netflix, but Final Space isn't one of them. Get the word out there. This show needs to come back. Give it all the attention you can.
Absolutely. Good stuff.
Excellent
And,
stuff, man.
You know, it's funny. I was reading that was actually done by Conan O'Brien's production company. And
Monaco,
for the
yes.
longest time,
Yep.
For the longest time that I've been on the podcast doing this, I've always signed off with "Stay tuned for Conan" because I'm such a massive fan of his comedy and work. So, yeah, definitely support Conan and and all the talented animators and voice cast, and I mean everything. There's a lot that goes into these kind of shows, and I think we forget when we get into streaming. It's like there's this idea that content is more disposable, and I think that's a very unfortunate thing that our culture is kind of latched onto, when there are a lot of people who are genuinely very passionate about this stuff and what they're doing and the work they're putting out there. So man, if it resonates with you, absolutely support it. Just get out there and buy physical media. Let's definitely get out there, man.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and especially when it comes to the preservation of media, some things somehow live on. What is the first movie on our list for tonight?
That is a good segue. Devin, do you want to
Devin, do
introduce
you-
this one, or
Yeah.
should I?
Go for it.
Is it-
Okay. Oh, so here's the thing about Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. All right. See, if I was in a situation where you held a gun to my head and asked me to explain the plot of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, I'd probably just ask you to put a bullet in my brain because I don't know what the fuck happened. I can tell you, like, generally what happens in this movie. Essentially, like, it's a B-movie parody spoof hybrid that was originally going to be a short film, but they blasted it into a feature film when a production company was dumb enough to greenlight it and give it $100,000 of a budget. So essentially, it's about these killer tomatoes invading the world, and all of these crazy characters get involved in a desperate attempt to stop the tomatoes once and for all. But, the overall concept is fine, but explain what happens, like, A to B, just scene from scene, is impossible, because the film is just so incoherent. Like, this is not a film with a plot. This is an event of things occurring. I can't.
So would we say,
That's
would
the thing
we
to say,
warn
hasn't
the
it?
audience, potential spoilers ahead, but can you really spoil something so non-linear and contained within a series of this movie to me felt like a Monty Python sketch.
It felt like a bad Monty Python sketch. Like the whole time I
Very,
was
very
watching
bad.
it,
And I wouldn't have it any other way.
I.
Well, I do find it interesting that this film came before Airplane. Because when I saw this, I thought, oh, this is like trying to be Airplane, but it actually predates Airplane. And you know, we even talk about, we haven't even talked about, like, the opening scroll of this movie kind of sets you up for what to expect. Because the joke is, yes, right. The joke is that in like whenever it was 1963, Alfred Hitchcock released a film called The Birds, and it was like laughed at, and people just like joked about it. It was like seen as this B-movie schlock, and you know, there was like this notion of birds revolting against humanity. But then it references in 1975 there was this natural disaster where birds started becoming hostile in this small town, and it was an unexplained phenomenon. I don't know if that's true. I didn't try to verify it. I kind of doubt it, but at the same time, this is like, okay, so then this real event happened and no one was laughing. And so now, what if all of the tomatoes in the world revolted? It's fucking dumb. It
reminds me of that Tomako episode from The Simpsons.
Yeah.
You see, the Tomako episode gave me more laughs and more suspense in a 22-minute segment than this entire hour and a half odyssey of a film. Had to pause there to think of the right words.
Yo, it had better filmmaking
Odyssey.
too. Like this film, I get it has a low budget, but I'm gonna put out some information that's gonna shock you. All right, this film had a budget of $100,000. Eraserhead, which came out 3 years beforehand, had the budget of $10,000.
Good
What
grief.
more do I have to say?
Well, the only pushback that I'd make about that is that those are two completely different types of films meant for two completely different types of audiences, made by two very different kind of people.
But it's just so much better made on like a filmmaking front at the very least. And I tried to look at this film as objectively as possible. Like, yeah, alright, it's obviously gonna look like shit, and you know, every time they move the camera it has this weird blurry effect that gives me a headache, but I could look past that. But the writing is just so abysmal. Any joke that has like the potential to be funny is played out for way too long, or it's repeated so many times that you're just sick of hearing about it. Like the small office scene, that gag is a great like 20-second gag, but it just goes on and on and on, and they keep reusing that set. And yeah,
are you talking about the guy with the pens?
Oh no, not with the pens. When they're in that like tight little office space.
The conference room. That's where they're all struggling to get out of the thing, and they have the very obvious overdubbing on the Japanese actor.
In fact, again, like that would have been so much more funny if it was like a quick little gag, but it just goes on and on and on to the point where it just isn't funny anymore.
I will say, I don't know if this was originally intended to be a short film or if it was actually shot as a short film first.
It feels like it.
But I think that was something I kept coming back to, is like, this would be hilarious and I would love this if it was like 20 minutes or less.
That's what makes the Monty Python skits work. The Monty Python skits are quick.
It doesn't work as a 90-minute feature.
No, it's agonizing.
Here's the thing, and I thought about this too, because there was a video essay that I saw recently about parody movies. And, you know, there was like a period where it was like parody movies were like, they were treated with much more respect. They were more like a staple of Hollywood, where you had films like Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles. You had films like Airplane, exactly. And, you know, even even later on, there were kind of these low budget sort of parodies that did considerably well. I mean, I think about one that was like Blades from 1989, which is just a knockoff of Jaws, but it's a killer lawnmower, and they have like an autopsy scene where they cut open the lawnmower bag, you know.
That's kind of fun.
And it's like a parody movie used to be like this real tangible genre to itself. And then somewhere along the line, it's like we got these really cynical cash grab kind of things. You know, there was like epic movie and disaster movie.
Oh.
And there was also like, what was that?
But before that, we had the scary movies, which is kind of where I picked up on the parody
Well,
movie genre.
the scary movie sequels really is where it started going downhill. And then by the time you get to like Sharknado, I think there's something less. There's something lost where the earnestness and kind of like the honesty of what you're doing is lost. It kind of becomes this very like corporate, cynical thing. And I feel like this movie is in a weird place.
Feels like that movie.
It feels like that.
Because
it
there's
feels
so
like
many
it
points.
Predates.
Yeah.
It predates that trend, but it feels like very just. There's something kind of slimy, no pun intended.
Yeah, it felt very insecure. Like, if there's one word I'd use for this
it's
movie,
like there's something rotten to the core in these tomatoes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's very insecure. Like, because there's several points where they're just like, look, isn't this dumb? Look, isn't this bad? Like, there's a point where like the guy like looks at the camera. There's another point where it's like, oh wow, the office is so empty, why does nobody else work here? And it's just that whole defense, because, you know, if you just admit that you're bad, you know, nobody can blame you, you know, it's fine. Like, we intended for this to be bad on purpose, you know. If you don't like it, you just don't get it, man. You just don't get like the artistic comedic genius that we were going for. Get on my level. I hate that.
Here's the funny thing about this movie. This seems like exactly the type of movie I thought would be a brilliant idea when I was like 8, 9, or 10 years old. And
absolutely.
I think this is exactly the audience it kind of caters to.
But it also has actually, like really. Go on, sure.
Well, I'd really like to actually ask that question. Does anyone have any idea what inspired this? Where did this idea come from?
Well, from what I understand it from my research is that it was like a short film originally. Like, they wanted to do like a spoof of like big monster horror movies like Jaws or Them or anything along those lines, but with like killer tomatoes. And like kind of as a they basically just wanted to do like their own spoof. What probably happened was that they saw Mighty Python and Mel Brooks and they're like, we could do that. We could do that.
Well,
no problem.
I think there was also this idea because at the time, you know, was it like William Holden? I think it was. I'm gonna have to Google this to make sure, but I know like there was a couple of producers like maybe not William Holden, but I know Roger Corman for sure, that were kind of making money off of these like low budget kind of parody movies. And, you know, like you said, I mean, it was like a parody of Jaws. It came from outer space. Mm-hmm. Those sort of like late night creature features. I seem to remember reading that there was like a Japanese film that had came out around this time that they were spoofing, and it was kind of like cave-dwelling people, I think, some kind of like monster movie. But when it came to the States, the translation was roughly something like the attack of mushroom, something or other, like the Mushroom Men. And so somebody thought, oh, well, what if Killer Tomatoes?
Yeah,
sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, they probably just like, you know, threw some shit at the wall, and it was like, oh, what if Killer Tomatoes, you know?
Let's see if that sticks. Yeah.
Yeah, the humor is very much along those lines. So it's like, let's just like, there's no consistency to the humor. Like any good comedy, any good parody, like they have consistent characters, and characters would behave in ways that fit their character for the sake of the humor. and that's what makes a comedy work, is just gelling all those elements together. But this is just like a slip slop of, like, the soldier guy, for example. Like, there's a scene where he's like cooks breakfast for the other guy, and that's the joke. So picture this, like, it's a soldier guy. He's used to like living out in the streets and living out on his own, and he's has this survival of the fittest mentality. You picture the breakfast being like these shitty rations, or like he has to like set up a campfire or something like that. Like, how much funnier would it be if he like set up a campfire and like had like a live squirrel cooking in like the bedroom and made that for breakfast? But he just cooks like a perfectly fine breakfast. It's like you're not even using like the strengths of the character, like, to enhance your comedy, and it just feels so. I don't know, like, poorly slapped together.
So I think now it's kind of like, because we've addressed, I mean, what a shit show this is, right? I mean, it doesn't really follow a coherent plot.
No.
It's about a bunch of people all over the world dealing with this uprising in tomatoes becoming sentient and attacking people. And if that doesn't appeal to you, don't watch this. But here's the thing. So it's like there was actually, this film kind of came out. It did well on the like drive-in circuit. Really low budget kind of thing. The reason that it took off, the reason that we're even talking about it today, there was a guy named Matthew.
Portelli.
No.
Yeah.
I have to find the guy's name. I wish I was more prepared for this. Matthew Medved, I think, was his name.
Right.
Michael Medved. Okay, Michael Medved, who was a film reviewer / political commentator, and he would eventually go on to work with like the Reagan administration, and he kind of later on his career, he kind of became like a right-wing conspiracy nut job. But at the time, one of his big things was he had a film festival for the worst movies of all time. And it was like a big event that he would hold. It was kind of like predating the Golden Raspberry Awards. And so this was his idea, and he was going to crown Plan 9 from Outer Space as the worst. So he found Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. He calls up the directors and like the crew and the filmmakers and everyone involved.
John DeBello is his name.
John DeBello. And he's like, hey, we want to have your film as the worst, one of the worst films ever made at our festival. And instead of being offended, like, John DeBello was like, yeah, we'd love to have it there, but only if you award us the worst film about vegetables. And so it took off in the news. It took off in the news as like kind of equivalent to what Sharknado was. It was like this thing that, everybody was talking about. Hey, did you know this exists? What a crazy, kooky concept. And from there, Roger Corman got involved. We had Return of the Killer Tomatoes, which actually has like an early appearance of George Clooney, one of his first acting roles.
I beg your pardon.
For real?
Yes, for real, yeah.
Okay.
And
that's wild.
I lost respect for George.
Birthed this in... Well, I mean, come on. You take
just
what
it's
you
a
can
little
get.
bit.
He
just
was also in... he was also in, Grizzly too, if we want to get technical. But, yeah, and it birthed this whole weird franchise. There was a crossover with the Muppet Babies, as I said. There was like 2 or 3 more sequels. There was an animated series. And here's the problem. I don't necessarily think this film is deserving of all
It is
that.
absolutely not. Like
I would love for
Yeah.
this to be this like misunderstood little B movie that could, but it just isn't. It
couldn't.
kind of
did.
sucks.
In a sense,
But it
did, though.
shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So what?
What do you mean? So well, that's my biggest problem with the movie is that if it tried to be serious, if it tried to be a genuine movie, I think I would have enjoyed it way more. If it just tried. Like, what makes Neil Breen movies so good? It's the fact that he tries. It's like, you know what, fuck it. I could do CGI, no problem. Let's just put a tiger on the screen. Violence, no problem. Squirt a bit of paint juice, we're good to go. Like, his films try, like, so much harder than this film does. And it's absolutely
Is the fact that
incredible
he's
because of it.
that he's self-aware enough to know that this is a bad movie, that kind of takes away from it, where you prefer people who make things in earnest and there just fails so miserably that you can't help but think it's endearing.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yes, I agree exactly. Because, I mean, I said this recently. I was interviewed for the Solo Nerdbird podcast, which I'm going to shameless plug here.
Hey,
and someone they asked me on that, what would be your advice to someone who wants to make a short film or wants to get into filmmaking? And I'm like, why would you ask me? No, no. But I was like, here's my thing. It's like, just go out there and try and make something. Because I brought up the fact, it's like you look at someone like Tommy Wiseau, and you look at someone like Ed Wood. It's like they made some terrible films, but damn it, they made a film.
Exactly.
And they tried. And they were like, they may have completely all of the wrong ideas, but they have ideas. This is really kind of just blatantly lazy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's so lazy, it's so incompetent. Like, there's just no passion to it. They're just like, yeah, let's just treat it like a joke and move on. And I wanted to get back to earlier, Devin. So your childhood self would make jokes about sexual assault and Black
No, that's
Hitler
not what I'm
and...
saying.
No, I'm kidding. I am kidding. It is a joke. I was kidding.
That is a logical fallacy. That is a straw man argument.
Dang, I actually do
herring.
want to. I would like to throw some gasoline into this fire, though, because throughout this film, we see a variety of jokes skewering some pretty topical things, even for the 70s. Multiple jokes center around the ineffectiveness and laziness and sleepiness of politicians, the overplayed length of radio adverts, or the ineffectiveness of the news, or commercialization of politics. And so my question to all of you that no one wants to answer is, do you think there's a deeper meaning at play in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes?
No.
Well,
No.
True. I'm glad you brought this up, because this is one of my favorite throwaway lines of the whole movie, where they're listening to, like, a political advertisement, and then she's like, man, isn't it terrible how our current president is so wishy-washy? There's no way we're going to have a worse one. Something like that. And
Womp, womp.
I don't know why I found that funny.
That aged more poorly than the Black Hitler.
No, the whole point was, the fact that it applies to literally any president, that they're all wishy-washy when it comes to handling issues.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's timeless movie, guys. It's classic.
Well, here's
I love that
here's
line.
the thing, and I'm glad I'm glad Drew brought this up too, because speaking of topical humor, there's also a joke where they're like, "Oh, it's the Deadbeats collection," and it's on
Jimi
the radio.
Hendrix,
They're advertising this music compact disc set of or I guess it would be vinyl. I don't know back then, but it's like all the
vinyl.
people who died, their music, and they list Jim Croce, and I was like, what the fuck? Jim Croce died 5 years before this movie.
It's because this music's bad, according to them.
That's a little soon, I would think.
Well, on top of that, they also put Jimi Hendrix on there. I'm like, how fucking dare you? You take him out of that
No, I
fucking
mean
list.
that was me with Jim Croce. I was like, what the fuck?
Why?
I
Yeah.
thought you were gonna say something about Jim, like Jim Crow, like that was like a reference to the Jim Crow thing. Like, where are you going with that?
No, Jim Croce, fucking time in a bottle, more talent in his little finger than any of the people involved with this fucking tomato.
I'm
movie.
gonna be honest.
Here's the thing:
Yeah, go on.
most of the people in this film were friends and families, members of the director, and a lot of them never acted in the film before, nor have they acted since. So you gotta give a little bit of slack here.
Best
There are a lot
Bicycle
of-
Thieves
say-
had no actors.
No, and I will say, as far as the
Oh man.
shall we say, topical humor, some of the jokes here made me cringe because of how dated they are.
I mean, that
I mean,
aspect
they
doesn't
took-
bug me. It's just the delivery.
No, I mean they do make some pretty gross racist jokes.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
And there's like a whole like thing where they actually say the word for gay people that you're not supposed to.
Okay.
technically,
F-word.
sir, tomatoes are.
Okay,
you mean
I'll be
fruits.
entirely honest. That one got a sincere laugh out of me.
Well, I mean it is okay, but I'm just saying like
That's a bit of my corrosive humor, though. Like I used to do, I used to make jokes like that all the time with my ex-boyfriend.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
oh yeah,
It's
okay,
a product
there
of
you
its
go.
time. Like I don't mind
I
that
mean,
aspect of it. It's
if you
just
say
not
it's
funny.
okay, I guess.
I mean, listen, if I can enjoy Tropic Thunder, which is a modern movie with blackface in it, then obviously
I- well,
controversial
Does this
humor
mean
is
I
not a
can
problem.
say the
I
F word in
feel
your
like-
presence?
Well, here's the
That's
problem.
alright.
I don't
Tropic
care.
Thunder-
First of all, everyone is allowed to use that word around me because it's absolutely hilarious. But I don't know if Twitch will allow us to say that, so perhaps
Fair
we should
enough.
avoid that joke.
Probably not. Yeah, probably
Yeah,
not.
probably.
I thought it was funny. Yeah, but
It was yeah, I mean,
he means fruits, sir. I was like, I honestly was so blindsided by that joke, I couldn't not laugh at it. Like,
Yeah.
well, it did totally come out of nowhere, and this is not like an R-rated comedy for its day.
Which is insanity. So,
Yeah.
like, I was watching this with my mother, and there were several points where she was just like, wow, okay, wow.
Oh,
Just
boy.
like every 10 minutes, yeah. Just like an oh boy or a wow. And I wanted to talk about that Jimi Hendrix scene because I actually had to stop the movie, go out for a walk, question my life choices, and then finish the movie that night. And not even the fact that they diss Jimi Hendrix, which is bad enough. I just hate that kind of humor that just boils down to, look, isn't blank celebrity dumb? Isn't blank politician dumb? Like, it's okay, you're not actually gonna say why they're dumb or why they're not talented. You're just gonna say they're dumb and not talented. Like, that's the laziest, most cliche humor you could possibly put into your humor.
I think you're
Sorry,
giving
movie.
them too much credit.
No,
I
no,
don't think
I
it's
hate
about-
that. That's what I'm saying. Like, I
no,
hate
but
that kind of
that's it.
humor.
I don't think that it's about Jimi Hendrix being dumb. I think it's
the
just,
writer thinks he's
I
dumb.
think it's just literally he's a celebrity who died recently and it's topical. Let's throw him in as a throwaway reference. I don't even think the film is as smart as you're giving it credit
No,
for.
that's not even
I don't-
smart. Is
oh,
what I'm
no.
saying. Like, it's
So,
so easy to
I
pick like a
don't
topical
think it's-
celebrity and
yeah,
be like, "Wow, they're dumb," right?
So
well, they're
I
dead
think we
is
could
the
go.
joke.
I think we could go back and forth on the dated humor of this film and one's temperaments in terms of comedy. I think that's all up to viewer discretion. If you want a more concrete reason to hate this movie, the very first fact in IMDb reads as follows: the helicopter crash in the early scenes was unintentional.
Yeah.
The Taylor rotor blades accidentally hit the ground, causing the helicopter to spin out of control. Debris and top rotor blades narrowly missed the police officers in the scene and the crew off camera. The pilot received minor injuries. After being pulled from the wreck, Jack Riley and George Wilson quickly ad-libbed the rest of the scene as the wreck was set on fire. The crash of the 60,000 rented helicopter used up more of the budget than all other aspects of the film combined.
yeah, I bet.
If we want to talk about reckless endangerment, that's giving me very strong Twilight Zone vibes.
That's all
Dude,
the
no,
No, I
stunts.
was literally just thinking that.
Yeah,
And
No,
you know,
that's the
this
majority of the budget right there. Just
yeah.
in that
All
unintentional
no,
helicopter
all of the
crash.
budget. All of the budget was in those stunts. Like there's not even that. There's a stunt where they're driving and like there's tomatoes covering the windshield. I'm like, you just blinded his windshield. That guy could crash in the side of a hill. That guy genuinely cannot see where he's going, and you can tell. And on top of that, there's another stunt where they're driving along and the stupid army guy has his parachute hanging out, and I'm just thinking that could get caught in the tire and the tire could skid off the road and crash. And
Yeah.
that's the best part of the movie, probably, is like the dangerous stunts, just from a perspective. Wow, like they did that for real. That's kind of cool. But it's also the worst
well,
because it's like
you know, this
for this movie, you almost killed your actors.
For
well,
for
and this
safety
was
was
gonna
not top
be
priority here.
Yeah,
this,
for
this
this.
was gonna be my, this was gonna be my edgy joke. It's like, Brandon Lee. I mean, it was tragic what happened to him, but he did lose his life in what is arguably one of the best like movies of the 90s, like one of the best horror movies, one of the best superhero movies, just like one of the greatest films that we've ever seen. I mean, I can't imagine being the guy who died for Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
I know.
Like,
Like, if I was,
what a
I can't
what a
speak
way
for
to
the
go.
actors. Let me put this out there. I can't speak for the actors, but if I was in this movie and I watched it after doing like a dangerous stunt, like almost getting ran over by a car or almost getting crushed by a helicopter, I'd watch this and be like, "What is this fucking shit? I almost got a concussion from this movie. Are you fucking kidding me?" Like, I'd be so pissed. Like, I'd be trying to sue the movie, and I can't speak for the actors, and to give them some credit, it definitely looked like the people making this enjoyed making it, so I'm glad they enjoyed it more than I did. But and that's where they blew their budget. Like, here's the thing: they could afford like all those expensive stunts. You can pay for a couple more sets. You can pay for more convincing looking killer tomatoes than just literally using actual tomatoes and giving them awful Donald Duck dubbing sound effects. Like,
Okay,
the
that
dangerous
was
stunts are
funny,
where you
though.
put your the dangerous stunts are where you put your money. Are you serious? Yeah,
Okay,
you
the-
know what
the
you're doing,
Donald Duck
guys.
noises were like one of the things I thought it was funny.
I disagree.
Well, I need to ask. I must know from you all. Do you have a favorite joke that came out of this film?
Yes. So the text jokes were kind of funny. And here's the thing: the funniest jokes is literally just a chuckle, just chuckles. There was no
Heh.
guffaws to be had this movie. Yeah, like heh or
I really like the advertisements in the opening credits. It reminded me of Monty Python a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about when they were in a clearly different city and they say it's New York when it's clearly not. Like, that actually got chuckle on me. And then
New
they
York
show
question mark?
and then they show a shot of the Empire State Building and it's like New York question mark. Like, that was kind of funny and wasn't in my face and was subtle. Like, good on you, movie. And the scene where the tomato was like wearing giant tomato near the end is wearing the earmuffs. So he has to like show him the song like
The sheet
lyrics,
music?
the sheet music. I'm like, that was my first chuckle, and that's it. Those are the only times I chuckled throughout this entire fucking movie.
I'm trying to think. There was a couple of jokes. I actually loved the whole bit with the radio news that was taking forever. I thought that was kind of funny. Yeah, I mean, it was here and there. I mean, this is just like this. This is one of those films that's just okay. It is like I don't know. I mean, I kind of hate it, but I also like. I did chuckle a few times, and it's like I don't know. It's just a really weird middle ground for me. I don't know when I would ever rewatch it though.
When would you guys? I think we're done talking about this piece of shit. What would you guys rate it out of 10?
Well, I'll wait. You guys go first.
Oh boy.
Well, I will say this film was really enjoyable after being affected by the flu. In case there wasn't enough evidence that the show's burning me out, I'm sick at home at the moment. What better way to recover than eat some tomato soup and watch this movie? 10 out of 10 poetic cinema. No,
Hey, there you go.
What's your
I was going to give it a very ironic 6.9, Although all things considered, it's probably a 3.4 in terms of enjoyment. Like I still thought it was endearing in a lot of cases. Um, I'm not sure that I regret not buying the DVD now, though.
You're giving this a 10 out of 10.
No, 3.4.
Oh, okay.
He
Well,
changed
no,
his
I was asking him though.
No,
Okay.
I can't. No, he changed the score. I heard it.
I would love this to be one of those things where we all gave it a 10 out of 10. It was
Nope.
just a fucking disaster.
Drew, what
It's
about
a
you?
it's a perfect film though to throw at your buddies if you're asking them any good film recommendations.
No, it isn't.
Well, I think that's actually exactly what I would say is, for me, this movie is one of the most contextual scores I'm going to give. If you're going to sit down and watch this darn thing because you think you're going to get any sort of high quality comedy, you're fooling yourself. But if you have your buddies for, say, a movie podcast, and you're going to watch this movie and you're going to have some laughs and you're going to have to banter about it, this movie is a solid watch. I would actually give this thing an incredibly generous 5 out of 10. You could do a lot worse, but you could also do a lot better.
Oh yeah.
One
It's just
Well,
one of those perfectly good trash movies to watch when you have nothing better to do. This would
Mhm.
actually be a perfect double feature with Leolo, which I feel remiss that we haven't talked about on the show yet.
you could also pair this with Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which is another 80s,
Or heck, I would also recommend, because I will admit to owning a DVD copy of Plan 9 from Outer Space, that's one you could pair this thing with.
Nice.
So Food Fight, Ian, or Drew, yeah, Food Fight.
No.
Perfect.
Yes,
No. You keep that.
I will also admit I do in fact actually own a DVD copy of Food Fight.
Hell yeah.
Oh, buddy.
No, this is the perfect trilogy. You have this, Food Fight, and either like Veggie Tales the movie or a Sausage Party.
I will leave this channel. I will leave this channel if that episode gets picked. I will.
It is definitely going in the next poll.
So
we'll just
Steven.
do the sequel. We'll do Return of the Killer
No.
Tomatoes. There you go.
Please don't.
Well, actually,
My brain
there's
hurts.
probably like 3 more sequels, so we'll just do an episode on nothing but the sequel and the animated series.
And we'll call it Rotten Tomatoes, because what else would you call it?
Hey,
Oh,
it's a 4 out of 10.
This is one awful film. One awful, irritating, unredeemable film.
Come on, man.
You have no fun. You have no fun boning
No,
your body.
I'm sorry. I was expecting a good time. I did not get one. I didn't feel like it was endearing. It felt very cynical. It felt like they just spent $100,000 taking the piss.
I do agree with that,
And
but it's
I just-
also like
I don't know. I got no
It's
enjoyment
kind of
watching it.
harmless too, though, right? Let's be real. It's Killer Tomatoes. What's that?
I guess so. And there was like a couple of chuckles, and people seemed to enjoy making it, but I would not wish this film upon my worst enemy. If we were picking a bad movie for bad movie night, I'll just pick Tammy and the T-Rex or Shark Attack Free. Giving this a 2 out of 10. I could not stand this movie. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Understandable, though.
Yeah.
This is a film that you picked off the sour end of the vine.
No, I get where you're coming from, Ian. I'm kind of like caught up in the moment. I feel like a 4 out of 10 is honestly generous
Yep.
on my part, because I had a similar reaction to what you're talking about. Like it's a disaster. No, it absolutely is. But
A disaster piece.
No.
well, speaking of the stained masterpiece of blood and filth, it's the next film in our trilogy, which I will be introducing.
Do it.
Go for it.
All right. Hellraiser from 1987. This is written and directed by Clive Barker, who actually started out as a novelist In fact, this is based off of his novella, The Hellbound Heart, from 1986. It is Clive Barker's directorial debut. We have not actually reviewed a Clive Barker directed film. We have reviewed quite a few films that were based on or adapted from his works. We reviewed Candyman, we reviewed Midnight Meat Train, and I believe a few others possibly. Those for sure. What is this film about? Well, it is a movie about a toxic relationship. A lot of kitchen sink drama and these, just run of the mill sexual BDSM demons that are running about because they can't even differentiate between pain and pleasure. And one of these things may or may not be trapped in the house with this young family and their young daughter and a married couple. There's themes of infidelity and themes of being uncomfortable in your own skin, and sadomasochism and kink and the occult. And yeah, uh, this film was kind of mixed upon release. Roger Ebert famously called this a bankruptcy of imagination.
Wow. Don't really agree with that. But he also said Mouth of Madness wasn't creative enough, so he was wrong
he
sometimes.
said The Thing was terrible, so
yeah.
I don't even.
I love you, Roger, but come on, man.
Yeah, but especially in recent years and even contemporary reviews before now have rightfully called this film a horror masterpiece, and I am very inclined to agree. This is one of my favorite horror films. I think if I were to do a top 10 best horror films ever made, certainly my favorites, this would be up there. I think this is so much more than I think people give it credit for, and than I think people really think of when you talk about, oh yeah, it's Hellraiser. And maybe that's kind of because as the franchise went on, the sequels kind of diluted things, and now they're trying to breathe new life into the series, which we'll get into later. But as far as the original, to me, this is a masterpiece, and I'm curious as to what you guys think.
Well, this is a first time watch for me, and I remember when we watched The Thing, people were shocked that I hadn't seen it, because you guys figured it'd be right up my alley, and I really enjoyed that film. I really absolutely like the sense of claustrophobia and the kind of transformation and the practical effects and how that all unfolds. And this is pretty well right up there, and it made sense that they were both Clive Barker films, or at least inspired by Clive Barker. Um,
Well, the thing was it was John Carpenter,
oh,
and
true, yeah.
that was more inspired by H.P. Lovecraft, but I think Clive
Fair
Barker
enough.
is also very influenced by Lovecraft. So
And very
they're definitely they're definitely of their era, and there are some commonalities and similar themes that they're exploring, particularly just like, I mean, the horror of your own body. And so I kind of get what you're saying there.
No, I really appreciated this film. And I remember hearing about it years ago when I was really young, and I had like kind of an interest in it. There was this other guy talking about just how fucked up Clyde Barker is, and this is like a kid on the playground back in public school telling me about this and saying, this guy just has this crazy imagination, and it really felt like at the time the way he was pitching it to me like one-upsmanship, like, oh, I have a more fucked up imagination than you do, and I was like, haha, we'll see about that. Um, I don't know why. It was just one of those things. But yeah, I remember the seed was planted of this film like many years ago. But this is the first time I've actually went out of my way and watched it, and felt like kind of a long time coming in that sense. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I liked the transformation scenes where uh, this body is kind of grown out of the like floorboards from just like a drop of blood or a few drops of blood, and then it ends up being this like craving for more blood in order to stay alive kind of thing, which is pretty horrific but really interesting. And yeah, the plot that this film, outside of the Cenobites showing up, was actually pretty interesting. And I liked that the Cenobites didn't really have a role directly until like the latter third of it.
Well, I
Well, in
mean,
a
like,
way,
sorry, I just want to say, for comparison and contrast, the special effects in Attack of the Killer Tomatoes are basically non-existent, but Hellraiser was a first-time watch for me as well, and this has some of the nicest looking practical effects I've seen in a long time.
100%.
There's a good reason that this movie became a piece of pop cultural iconography.
Oh yeah,
no,
like the VFX work was fantastic. I love when the body is coming out of the floorboards. They basically created like that dummy, and they destroyed it or they melted it slowly, and then they filmed it, um, or they played it back in reverse, and that's where it looks like it's forming. And the same effect actually popped up in not to make any huge spoilers, but Possessor, and that's the first film that I've seen that had done a similar effect as of recent. Which, if you haven't seen, that's another freaky movie.
Oh, you'd love that one, Steven. Gotta watch that.
oh, for sure, yeah,
Yeah.
it is on my watch list. I do plan on visiting it, and I'm a massive fan of David Cronenberg, who I feel like was pulling from the same kind of well, also. But I think one thing that is really important to note about this film, and we kind of we touched on it. I touched on it early in the introduction. But this film was released in 1987. 1987. I mean, this film was shot in Britain, so you had the Margaret Thatcher administration here in the States. You had the Ronald Reagan administration, and the biggest movie of the year in 1987 was like Three Men and a Baby. The biggest show on television was Roseanne. So for someone who is a new voice, who's coming out and said, I'm going to make this little independent film, and it's going to be a horror film, and it's going to be in Britain, and it's going to be about sex and violence and sadomasochism and the occult. I mean, this is like as metal as fuck as you could possibly
Yeah.
get.
Oh God.
This
Yeah.
was completely unheard of. It's still a little scandalous today, but in 1987, are you fucking kidding me?
Oh yeah, it's
Like
just absurd.
this no, I mean, and that's one thing that I absolutely admire about this film so much, is that it has the ballsiness and just it goes there. It fully commits to what it's doing. It is not making apologies. It's not interested in trying to please everyone. It's just, here's what it is.
I mean, to quote Videodrome, this movie has bite.
Oh,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly.
Careful, it bites.
I feel like Videodrome took maybe some inspiration from this, seeing
Oh,
the
yeah.
extremity of
Yeah.
these kind of images put into the horror genre, and he was right quick on the ball in terms of doing a meta commentary on that. I mean, Videodrome, that's another movie we talked about all the time, but we haven't officially reviewed, which is
And
crazy.
we need to.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I like that this inspired a whole movement of artists, they say, who like to intentionally hook themselves and kind of push their selves to the limit in terms of in terms of what the body can do, which is pretty nuts. I remember watching this duo of guys called Monsters of Schlock. I don't know if you remember them, Ian, but
Sounds
they used to
familiar.
do free shows at Fanshawe every year.
Really?
And this guy would have like an audience member drive a nail through his nose Like it was a doll
Oh
nail.
yeah, I remember that guy.
And he's also a science teacher at University of Guelph, which is really interesting. But
that always
these
happens.
people that do these kind of dumb stunts just for entertainment, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, he kind of on a technical level, like Hellraiser is perfect. Like the lighting is gorgeous, the practical effects are incredible, the Cenobites look. Cenobites. Is it Cenobites or Cenobites, Steven? Which is it? I always get it mixed
I
up.
say Cenobites. I think probably either or is correct. I think they do
Cenobites.
refer to them as Cenobites in the film. But I was listening to the Ryan Hollinger review the other day. He actually did a video on YouTube about his thoughts on Hellraiser. And for anyone who doesn't know, Ryan Hollinger is an Irish film reviewer and
However,
film critic. And so he was saying, "Oh, the Cenobites," and I was like, "I don't know if that's right."
so I'll stick with
Not to be
Cenobites.
confused with Cinnabon cinnamon bites.
Yes, exactly.
I just wanted to point out
Forever.
real quick. So one of the Cenobites in particular, like he's just got like the teeth and the mouth, and like his eyes
The
are
shadow.
completely covered.
Yes.
He reminded me a lot of the mouth of Sauron from Return of the King
Oh,
Extended
yeah.
Edition. And
Oh.
here's the thing: Peter Jackson is a big horror movie fan. So I
Oh,
honestly
I
wouldn't be surprised
absolutely,
at all
yeah.
if he looked at this
Mhm.
and was like, "Yep, that's gonna be designed for the mouth of Sauron," and I don't blame him.
I accept that 100%.
Yeah,
I think that's
he also looks
totally-
like the Nemesis from Resident Evil, but that comparison
Yeah.
is more fun. It has a great soundtrack. It's well shot. On a technical level, it's great, but I think on the story level and on a character level, it left me feeling pretty cold, to be honest. Like I just could not connect with the story or the characters whatsoever. I think the acting of the humans ranges from okay to downright awful. Like I don't know what the husband was channeling for that performance. I don't know if he was high or if he just didn't give a shit. But holy
Well,
fuck,
I mean, I
his
think
acting was
that
so bad.
I think that, but I mean, and playing devil's advocate, huh? There's an argument to be made that that's like part of who that is, right? I mean, he's an
I don't know.
ineffective, wishy-washy sort of guy, and
Just like
you
the
know,
president.
yeah, well, exactly. No, but he's so ineffective. It's actually funny. I remember reading sort of a trivia about this film, and there was a female production assistant on set who pulled Clive Barker aside and sort of joked with him that this movie should not be called Hellraiser. It should be called What a Woman Will Do for a Good Fuck. And
yep, basically. But like,
so that's
I don't know. It's not the fact that he's ineffective; it's that he straight up isn't reacting to things properly. I felt all of the human actors had that problem to an extent. Like even like the lead actress and the younger girl was probably the best actress in the movie, but even she had scenes where I'm like, yeah, that doesn't feel right. Like the scene where she's
I think
drunk
he was.
was
Is this Clive Barker's like first film,
Oh,
like as a director?
It
that's
is, yes.
true. That's a fair point. That's why I'm not as mad about it as it would be with like other more experienced directors, for sure, which will
Mhm.
definitely lead into the score. But it was, man, you could tell he did not have much experience with actors at this point. Like the Winona Ryder lookalikes.
I'm gonna disagree with you briefly about one thing. I
Yeah.
mean, the supporting cast of characters. You know, I mean, there's a couple here and there that are maybe not to the best of. You know, I mean, again, it's this was a first time directorial effort, and this was also like an independent film. I mean, this was made outside of the Hollywood system, obviously. So I'm willing to give some grace in that regard. But I would also just say, I thought the Kirsty character by Ashley Lawrence,
Yeah.
her performance, I honestly would put her up there as one of the finest, if not one of my favorite performances in a horror movie as the sort of final girl.
I don't even think she cracks top 10. Like she's better than everyone else, but she had so many moments that were so like her drunk acting, for example. Like that was so bad. That was like the fakest like I'm so
No,
clumsy. I'm fading into the sun to
absolutely
stargaze.
disagree with you there. I think
Come
she's
on.
phenomenal. Now, I'm not going to
She's
put her.
decent,
I'm
but
I'm not going to put her on par with, Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby. I don't think I would put her as my number one, but I think she's certainly within the top 10.
I don't even think
I
she beats
think
Jamie
she
Lee
is
Curtis,
great
man.
at Jamie Lee. Well, see, I have mixed emotions about that because honestly, I mean, I love John Carpenter, but I was never that big a fan of Halloween.
And I don't think
That
it's the
one was.
greatest film ever either, but I think Jamie Lee Curtis's performance in that was better than Ashley Lawrence's performance in this. I feel like Ashley Lawrence was a lot better in the second half. And I'm wondering if part of that is maybe because she was surrounded by the Cenobites with their like horrible,
I'm not.
creepy designs and everything.
I mean,
like
if
she had more to work with.
if we want to talk about Final Girls, I mean, I would probably put Sissy Spacek
Oh, what about
and Carrie.
the lead in Scream? Like the lead actress in Scream, she was fantastic. I'd put
Well,
her
now
way
this is a
above.
question
Well,
I actually want to suss out with you guys because I'm actually closer to Steven's camp here. I really liked Ashley Lawrence's performance, and I really liked Claire Higgins as the mother Julia. I really
Yeah.
liked the. You see, for me, what I liked about these characters was sometimes they have some, moments like Ashley Lawrence pretending to be drunk, but then there are moments where the characters portray shock and this post-traumatic psychopathy that goes through them, where Julia goes from being deeply and sincerely profoundly impacted by the fact that she has killed someone with her own hands for someone who is little more than a walking corpse, to eventually almost acclimating to this. And you can have that wonderful moment of her just sitting there in her chair, smoking and drinking, and she gets this truly psychotic grin as she realizes she can keep doing this to some psychopathic degree. I really liked that. So what I'd love to know from you, Ian, is
Yes.
which performances do you think were the strongest in this film?
Ashley Lawrence and the actors who played the Cenobites.
There you go.
Yeah, that's pretty much
Yeah.
it.
Which is
Like,
interesting. The main actor that played Pinhead, his name escapes me at the moment,
Who you
but
calling
that was
Pinhead?
his. No,
Doug Bradley.
that was his first movie role apparently.
Nice. He did a good job. Like he has like a really cool,
Oh yeah.
calm voice. I like the other Cenobite that spoke up with the. But we have so much to plan with you. Like that's such a creepy, like whispering voice.
We have so many sights to show you.
We have
That's
so
very
much. No, that was
cryptic and
the.
interesting.
Yeah, that was. The
Yeah,
main
but
guy.
it was interesting. He was given the option whether he wanted to be the main titular baddie, Pinhead, or be one of the guys that helped like move the mattress into the house, like be one of his friends. And for him, it was like an obvious choice to why not go for Broken and be like the lead role and see how it goes. And I thought he did a terrific job. And it's interesting that the producers were initially pushing back on it. They wanted him to be not this very intelligent and articulate character, but to be more like Freddy or like Michael Myers, where he's just this very kind of silent, stoic. Maybe he cracks some jokes, which I think would have been a much inferior character. The fact that he's like,
Absolutely. And this too is part of. I mean, it's interesting you bring up Halloween, Ian, because I think one of the problems that I have with Halloween, as groundbreaking and revolutionary as it may be, and again, I'm a massive fan of John Carpenter, but I have never really gotten into this idea of the horror villain who is just this sort of hulking sort of Nietzschean Ubermensch that's just completely silent and walking around with a machete. I mean, it kind of works in some of the Halloween films and some of the Friday the 13th films, but I think it kind of wears thin, whereas I'm almost always more drawn to these characters that have some personality. I mean,
I'd agree with that.
Candyman
Oh, yeah.
is a fantastic villain,
Freddy
and I'd
Krueger.
argue
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger is too. Yeah, no, I think when you have someone who has that sort of personality and that sort of interesting sort of appeal to them, that makes the film more memorable and more terrifying overall.
Yeah, and I agree with that for sure. Like, I wasn't saying that Halloween was objectively better in every way. I'm just saying it had a better final girl. And I agree, like, the villains are definitely the best part of this movie, but it's kind of my problem that stems to something like the Dark Crystal, where the villains have so much personality and so much of a presence, despite not getting the most amount of screen time possible. But the actual human characters are so boring and unlikable that I just couldn't get drawn. Every time they were on screen, I was like, just go to the undead male fatale, go back to the Cenobites, go back to all this trippy, bizarre, creepy imagery. Like, I was just constantly annoyed every time it cuts back to the humans. I shouldn't necessarily feel that way. It's kind of like the opposite with how I how I felt with The Exorcist, where I was more drawn to the human characters than the actual horror elements. And but
Well, I mean,
yeah.
I still maintain that you're 100% wrong about The Exorcist. I mean,
Oh,
that is
that's fair.
that
That's fair.
that to me. No, I mean, and I'm just saying, like, as far as horror movies, if I had a Mount Rushmore of like my absolute favorites, the best ever made, I think The Exorcist would probably be at the top of that. But I mean, I think the thing about Hellraiser that kind of puts a lot of it in perspective is like this was kind of Clive Barker's answer to um we reviewed The Full Monty on the show, which is another movie that talks about this very different political landscape of where Britain was at, and this sort of like Thatcher era. People are struggling to get by. People are feeling emasculated in a sense. There is this push to sort of fit everyone into this very like nuclear family kind of thing. And I think what Clive Barker is doing, completely satirizing that and flipping it on its head and saying, yeah, here's the normal family that lives across the street. And oh, by the way, there's a half dead guy that the wife is going out and cheating on her husband with and bringing back human sacrifices and I mean I think there's some brilliance in that, and I feel like the human drama is so intrinsically woven into all of the supernatural Lovecraftian just all of that I think it would be hard to separate it. I think the human drama is better because of the Cenobites, and the Cenobites are better because of the human drama. I think it meshes together in a way that I think maybe you're not giving credit for. And I get it, this film is definitely not for everyone, and there are some things that are maybe dated by modern sensibilities, but I think this film is phenomenal.
Well, here's the. Normally in other films, that element would bug me more. Like, I personally don't agree with that, but there are a couple aspects that make me more forgiving of this aspect than would be of other movies. Like, first off, it is the fact that it is Clive Barker's first directorial experience, and yeah, he doesn't necessarily have the best experience of actors or writing compelling writing outside of a novel format. But the other thing is, it doesn't take itself super seriously, surprisingly. Like, there's actually a lot of parts where it's like, I feel like this is in on the joke a little bit. I feel like this is intentionally pretty funny.
Yeah,
like,
no,
the best
Oh, yeah.
scene in the movie is when, like, she's visioning having sex with somebody. It just hard cuts to them, like, trying to push the mattress up the stairs. And like, push, push.
Oh, that was hilarious. I love
Get her
that.
around the corner.
No,
I was
I
like,
mean,
that.
I feel
That was
like
good.
this film is 100% like in on what it's doing. I mean,
Not
the whole
100%, but pretty far
closing.
up there.
Well, I mean, come on, the closing scene where it's like Jesus wept.
Yeah.
I mean, that is you can't tell me that's not 100% self-aware. I mean, come on.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
But I didn't get the political angle from this. But what I did see that I thought was kind of interesting, and this was just a very lucid idea. But the fact that she's trying to, in a literal sense, resurrect this affair that she had that was kind of abusive and destructive. And that kind of brings all this. It kind of raises hell in the household.
Literally,
that was
Rekindling an
that was
old flame,
yeah.
so to speak.
Yeah, that burns the house, ends up burning the house down.
Yeah,
More or less.
no.
I kind of found it. This may sound a bit far-fetched. I kind of found it to be like an allegory for AIDS. And hear me out. Like every horror movie around the 80s, because this was such a prevalent issue, and they all believed because
AIDSies.
they didn't really believe. Yeah, exactly. They didn't know any better. They thought like that was tied to like sexual acts, and the idea of like pain and pleasure being mixed together as one, with like references to like bloody imagery involved with the acts of sex, and the whole idea that like being with this partner like comes back in a bloody form and eventually corrupts the husband that she inevitably has sex with, and the only person not affected by this is like a literal stepdaughter, like somebody who isn't even of the same blood. Like I thought there was kind of an interesting angle of that too, but I don't know.
I think
just
100%, and it's
Yeah.
also, I mean, Clive Barker is openly gay, and so
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you guys have ever seen, and I know you haven't, but I keep bringing it up on this show, the film Cruising, by William Friedkin, which was one of his films he made after The Exorcist, and it shows Al Pacino as an undercover cop, and he's trying to infiltrate this sort of New York underground leather scene. And you know, there's some humor in that too, with like Al Pacino walking into the club, and he doesn't know what kind of bandana to wear on his ass. So he winds up, you know, walking up to some guy with a yellow bandana, and that means water sports. And it's like, you know, I mean, no, but that film, if you watch that, and you know, Friedkin is coming from his own sort of experience as a very, you know, kind of straight-laced, you know, heterosexual kind of, you know, guy, and the way that he shoots it and all. But there is some commonality in this, like, almost horror movie vibe of like being out of place, feeling uncomfortable in your own skin, and walking around in these, you know, big burly men in leather and assless chaps. And it's like, I think there is something there to where I think Clive Barker probably was in a lot of environments like that. And I'm obviously not judging, I'm just saying I think that he's drawing from, like what you're saying, the AIDS crisis, the sort of leather scene of the 80s. I think he's kind of taking those experiences that he probably had very close experience to, and he's like morphing it into the surreal and the cerebral and the cosmically horrific. And I think there is some genius in that. It reminds me of there's an old adage about like write what you know, you know, but maybe not in the literal sense. You know, just take what you have experience with and morph it into something subtextual and fantastic.
You can tell that the Wachowskis were into that scene when they made The Matrix.
Yep, everybody
No, yeah.
wears leather,
That
and
comes
that
across.
the good guys are wearing leather. So yeah,
Oh, yeah.
and the bad guys are wearing suits.
So here's the
but-
difference then.
Best.
The real difference we have, lads, is that Hellraiser is what happens when you don't establish a safe word.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
that's
no.
true.
Wow.
That's true.
Consent is key.
And hey, if you have like a mouth fetish, or if you just like blowjobs, the guy with the teeth, just give him a call. Give the mouth song a call.
What's that mouth do?
He's got his number written on the bathroom stall.
Yeah.
When you see the chatterer Cenobite and you're like, hey, what's that mouth do? No,
Oh
it's
no!
Please see
It honestly reminded me of that Czechoslovakian stop-motion animated adaptation of Alice in Wonderland
Oh,
with the rabbit, the taxidermy rabbit being reanimated. Oh
on.
my god!
Jesus
that's
Christ.
properly
Terrifying.
unsettling, eh?
Came out a year later after this, so I wonder if there was. I don't think there was some influence there directly, but.
Can we check to see if there's a Czechoslovakian dub of Hellraiser?
Oh, there
Oh my
probably
god!
is. Let's do it. Well,
yeah.
what would you guys give Hellraiser out of 10?
I'm gonna give it a 6.9.
Nice.
Really? I'm surprised you didn't go higher. I mean, I'm legitimately surprised. I'm gonna take that
I'd take it.
inverted. I think this is a 9.6.
Ooh,
Ooh, yeah.
okay.
What would
Right
you
up
gi-
there, huh?
What would you give it, Drew?
For me, reoccurring listeners of the podcast will know horror is a very mixed genre for me, but I'm still giving this a 7.5 out of 10. Like, for everything that this movie is, I enjoyed it from start to finish. Some of this stuff sincerely unsettled me, and everyone's got, stronger tastes these days, but I don't know, there were a bunch of the scenes in this movie that just for lack of a better phrase, really got under my skin. 7.5 out of 10.
Crawling in my skin.
I'm giving
This
this.
orange will not peel.
I give this
That was
one
great.
a 6 out of 10. It is a brilliant, magnificent tech demo that unfortunately had to have humans show up at some point. That's my review of Hellraiser.
Well,
I
speaking of
enjoyed it overall, though.
speaking of modern sensibilities, did anyone see the Hulu Razor film?
I did.
Ooh, I have not yet.
All right.
But I will
Okay,
soon.
we'll keep this brief and spoiler free as best as possible. Ian, what did you think of that one?
Well, it's interesting because this isn't the case of like the original Suspiria or the Suspiria remake, where it's like, okay, I'm drawn to the remake way more than the original personally. This was the case of like there were some things the original did better, and there were some things I personally thought the reboot did better. First off,
Yeah.
being like I think the acting is way better in the Hellraiser reboot, which may be an unpopular opinion. I kind of like that the Cenobites have more of a presence. Like, yeah, they have personality in the original film, but this film really leans into that, which I think was like a really great choice because they're easily the best part of the first film, and they're easily the best part of this one. The designs are interesting. I'm still not sure how to feel about them, but they're still really well done. And there's a fantastic mix of like practical effects and really seamless CGI, which is surprising considering the budget for this wasn't that high. Considering it's a streaming
I was
film.
also surprised. Yeah.
Yeah, it looked really good.
The thing about the Hellraiser movie on Hulu is I wasn't as crazy about the first half of the movie, but then when it got to the second half of the movie, I was more forgiving of what I didn't like in the first half because I felt like it finally committed and it was like, oh, holy shit, now it's Hellraiser. And that kind of, that to me was where I was like, oh, okay, now I get what they're doing. And it took a while to get there. It's definitely a slow burn. This may be a hot take, but I think Jamie Clayton, her performance is just as good, if not possibly even better than Doug Bradley. I thought she was brilliant.
So good. Like her voice is like really creepy and raspy. Reminded me a lot of Shodan from System Shock. If you ever played that, like just
I have not, but I mean she is phenomenal, and I am very excited to see where her career goes, and I would love to see them continue with her in the role because I mean I can't say enough good things about her performance. It might be one of my favorite performances of the year. She is phenomenal.
Yeah, all of the performances were really good this time around. Like it wasn't just a case like the humans, even though their characters are kind of annoying. I didn't think they were as unlikable as they were in the first movie, and they were much better acted, in my opinion, personally, at least. And the whole addiction angle, like not to spoil anything, but this kind of centers itself around addiction instead of like the act of sex, which I thought was like a really clever workaround for the pain and pleasure. Like it's literally the concept of drug use. It's literally the concept of being on a high but sacrificing your body in the process. I thought that was an interesting idea.
I do think it could have stood to be a little more horny. In all honesty.
Well, but I feel like in order for it to have gotten made, they had to make it a little less horny.
Yeah,
it does feel very polished in a studio sort of way, but ultimately I wound up loving it. What would you rate it, Ian? Just real quick.
6.5, 6.9. I'll give it a 6.9 out of 10. The fact that
I would,
yeah, go on.
I would be a little more generous. I thought it was great. I thought it was an 8 out of 10. and that might be a little generous, but I'm really curious to see where the series goes, and I want it to continue with Jamie Clayton.
Yes.
We talked about Hellraiser. We didn't even get into the fact that, like, there have been 9 sequels to this film, and
Oh wow,
Clive
that's
Barker
nuts.
lost. Yeah, Clive Barker lost the rights. It's passed back around and forth. There was a company that was trying to hold on to the rights. There was, this thing where it would get passed around, and they would take like a junk script out of the door, out of the drawer, and throw Pinhead into it. And there was just a period there where it was a really dark time to be to be a Hellraiser fan, and I
Oh yeah.
am fully excited to see where this goes, and I really want to see a continuation. I think there's absolutely room for more story to be told.
Yeah, here's the thing.
It's interesting because I remember seeing an interview where Clive Barker says he's when going back and doing the interview, he's saying he's been over the Hellraiser thing, he's done with it. This is the last time I'm ever going to be like involved in it. Um, and maybe that was after they made like 2 or 3 movies.
And he was like, I gotta go back
Well, that was
to ruining my
no,
baby.
that was yeah. He's only really involved in like the first 2, and then I think by the 4th one, he's like, I'm out. This is
Yeah,
not
this
even
isn't
what I was
working.
trying to do.
Yeah.
But hey, they do. He is an executive producer on the new one on
Apparently,
Hulu,
he gave it
and
a seal of
I think
approval
it.
before it got out.
I think it absolutely benefits from his uh, his guidance and seal of approval. Yeah. So, well, we have one film left tonight,
Yep.
and when your haunted house is thus, it's Insidious.
All right, Drew, take it away.
Oh
Wow.
boy. I recommended Insidious tonight because I have not actually gone out and seen a ton of horror films in theaters. But I remember it was with some friends actually. We didn't go out to the theater, but I remember watching Insidious for the first time like a year or two after it came out, and it became probably one of my more favorite horror movies. The general premise is that a family has a nice, peaceful life, and that doesn't stay the same for much of this movie's runtime. With a novel premise of the supernatural haunting element of this story not being tied to a location but one of the characters themselves. And I'm going to let the audience know, if they weren't familiar with 102 episodes of this show by now, there will be spoilers for a movie I genuinely like. Um, Insidious
In
was. Yeah.
in fairness, this movie is now 12 years old, so I
It
mean,
is, and it's got 3 sequels.
Oh
Yeah.
wow.
yeah.
One of
Well,
two
not
of
sequels.
which
There's some
were
prequels,
But
and
yeah.
yeah.
I will say I went into this not knowing anything about it really. I knew it was a James Wan film, and I had seen Saw and 1 or 2 others. He's not like a favorite director of mine. It's a certain brand of horror that really dominated the 2010s or the 2000s. I mean, um, and I was never like that into them. But going back, I will say I think this is one of his better ones, if not maybe the best one that he's made with Leigh Whannell. Um, and I really like the theme of it, which, spoilers, it's not the house that's haunted that they're in, it's the kid who mysteriously goes into a coma. And it turns out he had been unwittingly astral projecting in his sleep. Um, and he accidentally goes too far in this place called the Further, which leaves him, unfortunately, as an open door to the real world that these other darker souls have been kind of gravitating toward, which I thought was a really interesting premise. I mean, they had the whole exposition dump partway through to kind of explain it all, and I would have rather they kind of maybe keep that a bit of a mystery. But I did think that this was kind of a unique angle to take for these types of films. That said, it's very much still like a traditional haunted house style of horror film. And there's one thing about Leigh Whannell's like writing, or at least this era of them. I think he did a terrific job branching off and doing The Invisible Man. I'd love to see more Leigh Whannell directed features because I think he really
Watch
has
upgrade.
something there. Yeah, but yeah, like there's one thing, interview clip I saw after the film where Lin Manuel's talking about writing this, that they wanted to do like a traditional haunted house story with a twist, which okay, you're already kind of relying on a cliche, but it's something you genuinely love, so you can do something interesting there. Um, but then they're talking about the seance scene, and the way that they're describing this is there are certain scenes you kind of have to have writing in this genre, which I guess is true for these types of films. I like it when people are willing to, break the molds and try something completely different and see if it works. But I can understand they want to make a return on this, so they're probably kind of relying a little bit on kind of familiar tropes. And one element that he said in that whole seance scene when she wears like the gas mask and the guy's like reading to her, that didn't like make sense to me when I watched it, and it made sense when I heard him say that that was something he wrote to kind of distract you from the fact you've seen these types of scenes before. So, oh,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ah,
so
Well,
it's
I
it's
will.
like it's like an intentional novel distraction
well,
to
Well, I gotta
make it
ask you
seem more
guys.
unique.
There were a lot of things about this film that I found quite, with a unique twist or a very compelling angle. So the fact that it is the child who's the conduit for the, hauntings, not just the location. One of the first things that really drew me into this movie was the subversion of the haunted house trope, because we've all seen it before. The people are haunted, but they're dumb and they don't leave the haunted house. When weird things start happening, and the parents just sort of sit there on the walk of their house and go, "We should leave," and then they absolutely do leave. That sold this movie to me. Like, oh, these people have brains. Like, good for them.
Wow,
They
they
just
actually
got up
thought
and
this through.
left.
And they
No,
also
I agree with that.
said
I
they
think that.
avoided like cheap jump scares. And I also like the fact that the dad is actually involved in the end and he tries to save his son. Like I thought that was really cool.
Well, I do agree. I mean, I think the subversion of, oh well, let's just move. I mean that's kind of,
kind of clever.
I mean, that's kind of genius in itself. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the problem that I had with this film, um, from my perspective, and I think I may be like the biggest horror nerd on the on the show tonight. So
Perfect.
I feel like there was a lot of elements of this film that I had maybe seen done in other films. There's elements of The Omen. There's elements of Poltergeist. There's elements of The Exorcist.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you have that knowledge of horror, I was kind of thinking about those other films the whole time, which is kind of a disservice to it. But no, I mean, there's a lot to like here. I did have a few issues, aside from the fact that, there's definitely homages and little touches that James Wan and Leigh Whannell are playing with that kind of felt a little heavy-handed if you know what to look for. But the one thing that I think I struggled with the most is this film doesn't have a lot of breathing room.
Not at
I
all.
feel like it would benefit from just a little bit better pacing, because it's almost like we're introduced to the parents, we're introduced to the kid. Okay, the kid's possessed. Like there's not a lot of time to really learn anything about these characters, and I kind of struggled with that because there's a point at the midway half of the film where it's like the sort of psychic medium has come into the house. They're going to perform this exorcism or seance or what have you, kind of figure out what's actually going on. And at this point Patrick Wilson jumps up, who he's like, this is a bunch of kooky nonsense, a bunch of witchcraft bullshit, get out of my house, I don't want anything to do with you people. And then it's like, okay, now we're setting up this drama, and he goes into the kid's bedroom, again spoilers, and he sees some drawings on the wall, and that's it. Like that he is now fully convinced. And I remember thinking, like, that feels a little unnatural. It feels a little rushed.
It feels a
That
little
he would
bit like,
just
why else would he?
I
Shit, we all
thought
know
his
why he did.
objection felt unnatural and rushed. Well, kind of, but it felt tacked on.
Well, no, I
Initially.
mean, but if he's going to just completely reject it outright and be like, "No, this is a load of shit. You're preying on my wife's understandable grief, and you're trying to profit off of us," and he's that much objected to it. I don't necessarily believe that he would go into the bedroom and immediately have this change of heart. He would probably say, hey, this is just the overactive imagination of a child. And, I mean, that might tie into part of his rejection too, because he might say, well, all these people are putting these ideas in my son's head, and I just, need my son back. I don't need this shit. But I feel like
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree. I
think
think
there's
it
a
would have been
lot of it that's very rushed.
Yeah, very.
and it makes sense when you realize that this was all shot within 3 weeks.
Yeah,
Which
that might have some.
is that makes producers happy because it's very economically shot and put together,
oh
and then it
sure,
makes
yeah.
money. But no, I agree that I think that's felt a bit rushed. I thought it would have been interesting if we were led to kind of disbelieve it for a minute, like maybe she is taking advantage of her to an extent. Like, what if that was partially true? That'd be a lot more compelling.
Yeah,
rather
but
than
there's
he's
no
just having
meat
a
there.
moment.
Yeah, it's just.
Now, I gotta tell you guys, in particular, usually I'm a guy who enjoys, focusing on the things I enjoyed the most about a film. And as much as I liked this movie, so much so that I wanted to recommend it, there is one part of this movie that absolutely obliterated my immersion in this film, which had me laughing way harder than I absolutely should have. And it was near the climactic ending, again, spoilers, where they're going into the further. This guy's, gone into this supernatural realm to go and get his kid's, I guess, soul back, and they encounter that demonic force. I'm being vague on purpose. You can spoiler away now. They encounter the demonic spirit that's been haunting them. And what is he listening to on his gramophone in hell? It's Tiny Tim's Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Like the fucking SpongeBob pilot episode, I was guffawing when this happened.
Oh man, that happened a couple times and I laughed too.
Yeah, the tone. I just want to preface this by saying I love James Wan. Has he made a particularly great film? No. Has he made a lot of films that objectively aren't great? No. But he's kind of like how you feel about Eli Roth, Steven, where he's this wholesome filmmaker that, like, I just get the vibe that he doesn't want to make films to make high art. He doesn't want to make films to make money. He wants to make films because he just loves making movies, and he has so much fun making movies. You can kind of like feel this infectious energy from Aquaman to Malignant to the Conjuring movies, which I actually think might be his best horror movies. I've never felt mad watching any of his movies because of that. Until I saw Insidious. I'm sorry, Drew. I kind of hate this movie. I really
no, tell me about it.
Well,
no, I kind of hated it too. But
well,
I'll let Ian go first.
Here's my problem of this movie is that there's no character development. It feels like they skipped Act 1 and went straight to Act 2, but then the film plays it off like, of course, like, these characters. Of course we've been developing these characters the whole time. There's so many moments, like when discussing like the life of their son, or like the final plot twist with Patrick Wilson being possessed at the end of the movie. Like, it's just insisting that we should care, but I don't. I don't know any of these people. They are the most cardboard cutout wooden characters imaginable. You don't even need a lot of time to develop characters. We talked about how much we love the Feint on this channel, but that movie made
I think you're meant to. I think you're meant to project your own kind of family situation into it.
Yeah, that's the problem. Like,
well,
it's not that it's rushed, it's that it completely misuses its time because it's more obsessed with cheap jump scares and music that spoils every single creepy moment that this movie could have had. It's more interested in doing that. It feels like a waste of time.
Here's something, and this may be an unfair comparison. I don't know. It does have I'm going to reference two films that have horror elements, but they're both crime thrillers.
Yeah.
Okay, so when we reviewed Prisoners, we talked about that there's a whole scene in the beginning, and it just perfectly sets up everybody in the room. You know, they're talking about Hugh Jackman, and they're like, this is the kind of guy who whistles the Star Spangled Banner in the shower. And it's like they do that for all of the characters. They introduce Jake Gyllenhaal's character, and they take like 5 to 10 minutes in just a couple of words, you know, everything about these characters. And now, when it gets to the final act where we have to go find the kids, you know, Hugh Jackman is like taking a hammer to Paul Dano, you know, who's always beat up in every movie he's in. It's like we understand who this is, we understand why it's happening, and if the film is working, we're almost rooting for Hugh Jackman to absolutely cave this kid's skull in. And it's putting you it's putting you in the mind of this psychopathic sort of revenge fantasy, but it's able to do that in 5 minutes so that the rest of the 2.5 hours of the film feels well earned, feels justified.
And it does it so damn well.
Absolutely.
It does, and I would argue that Brawl in Cell Block 99 does that too, where Vince Vaughn is introduced, there's infidelity, his marriage is not going well, he takes up an old job, and, you know, now he's presented with the option that he can kill someone in this prison for this very violent gang, or his wife and unborn child who we've spent the last hour getting to know and getting acquainted with. You know, they're going to die a violent, awful death. There is this talk of like bringing an abortionist in and crippling this child for life, and it's very brutal. But it sets up. Well, it is spoiler, but it sets everything up, and it is now we understand the stakes, we understand the characters, and I think the thing that this film doesn't do well is that I kept thinking, kind of like Ian was saying, like, who are these people? I don't know anything about Patrick Wilson. By the time that he's in the further, I don't know who he is. I don't know what I look at this film as a whole. I don't understand what the arc is. What are these characters learning from this journey? What is the point of this?
Well, Patrick Wilson's becoming less of an idiot. That's it. That's the arc.
Well, and here's the thing, and I remember thinking this while I was watching it. You know, there's this whole sequence where Rose Byrne, who a phenomenal actress, if you guys haven't seen, she was the lead star on a TV show that was on Netflix. Last I checked, called Damages. And it was Rose Byrne and Glenn Close, and it's a phenomenal show. I'm a massive fan of hers. But you know, there's this whole scene where, you know, it's like they're introducing, you know, like the Rose Byrne and Patrick Wilson are at their house, and I just looked away from the screen for like a split second, and there's Barbara Hershey. And I'm like, oh, who is this character?
Yeah, and she's her mother. It's like, wait, your mother? Wait, you have a mother? Was this addressed? Like, again, like, I feel like I missed the first act of this movie.
I just, like, I looked away from the screen
and there
for
she was a
5
jump
seconds,
scare.
and I thought, well, no, I thought maybe she was the psychic.
That's what I thought,
then
too.
it turns...
Yeah.
But then it was like, oh no, that's her mother. By the way, this is her mother. Did you know she has a mother? Here's her mother, and it's Barbara Hershey. And oh, by the way, her mother knows
just
this
happens
psychic
to know a psychic. Yeah.
Because Patrick Wilson also happens to be a conduit. This is an inherited trait.
Yeah,
it's like, and they should have done a much better job foreshadowing this. Like, they might mention them in passing, and it would have been disarming if we get wrapped up in the family kind of situation, the family drama, and we almost forget we're watching a horror movie for a second. We're sort of wrapped
Absolutely.
up in
Yeah.
what their story is, what's going on. And then when shit goes real, suddenly we really care. And then these characters they mentioned in passing, like, oh, my mother's out of town today. She's gonna come by and help us out, whatever, you know. And then we would have seen where they come from and not be blindsided by all these characters suddenly being relevant to the story.
Like, I could have forgiven all of that if the film was genuinely scary, but outside of like a couple of kind of creepy moments, I just personally didn't find it very scary. These kind of movies and like 80s slasher movies made me quit the horror genre for a while. Like I can't get behind like cheap jump scares where like the character will look around one corner, then they'll look away, then they'll look at the corner, and oh my god, somebody's there. That's every single jump scare in this freaking movie. There's so many jump scares like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
and the music spoils
I remember
so
I
many of the
remember just
scares on
going
top
bah
of it.
bah, like I was waiting for the screen to happen, and I was just trying to predict when it would happen.
But the film
Well,
Like
keeps
I didn't
doing
see it
that.
coming. It might have been
Here's
a way
the
just
thing.
to defend myself from being. And actually, I will say the one jump scare that I knew for sure was spoiled for me going in because I had seen the screen grab of the red face coming up behind
Darth
him.
Maul, yeah.
It did
Well,
pop
they
up when
put
I
that in
didn't
the
expect it.
trailer
So
too.
Yeah.
oh yeah, they put it in the trailer, but it came up when I didn't expect it. So that was literally the only one that got me. All the other
Well,
ones I could see coming a
here,
mile away, and I would just go bah 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 at the screen waiting for it.
here's the thing, and I love slasher movies. I love horror movies of all varieties. So I'm gonna disagree with Ian there a bit, but I do agree with him that I didn't find this film scary. I think it just, as it goes on, it kind of becomes silly. I mean, by the time you
The
actually
tone
get
is
to
so all
hell,
over
and
the
there's this
place.
whole
Yeah.
there's this like Tiny Tim song, and it's like when they first did that bit, it was kind of creepy because they had a kid that was like a ghost dancing in the house to that song. And, you know, maybe if they had explored that more with, oh, this kid was murdered, and, you know, maybe like when you least expect it, you know, the dad is in his car or something, and he turns on the radio, and that song comes on, and it won't go off. Which, never mind the fact that it's Tiny Tim of all.
But yeah.
But maybe there's, you know, maybe there's like a haunted phonograph or something. Like, I don't know. There seems like there would be a way to tie that into this overall narrative, and then it just comes out of nowhere, and the theme is like rocking out to this. I don't even know, man. It's
Ramstein.
And not just that, like even the elements of like the Leigh Whannell and the other fat nerdy guy like coming in with all these like film equipment and like these Ghostbuster radiation scanners.
Yeah.
Like that was so goofy, but the rest of it's not like Malignant where it's like, okay, this film is in on the joke. This film commits to the bit, or The Conjuring where it's like, all right, it's just a serious horror movie. Like it's so all over the place.
Well,
like it wants to be like cheesy and corny, but it also wants to be deadpan.
There is one
thing.
There is one thing that I did appreciate or kind of thought there was some potential, and it's when he goes into the further, he sees these people that maybe lived in this house before, and they were all kind of like murdered, and that they still try to haunt kind of the things.
That
but I
had
feel
so
like
much potential.
They really missed an opportunity there to really get into them. Like how interesting would it be if he's just overwhelmed by all these you know, souls who life ended abruptly, and they just have these unresolved issues, and they're just kind of in limbo forever, rather than just these creepy smiling faces that are kind of stalking around. It would have been interesting if he heard like voices whispering or something, and he's suddenly emotionally overwhelmed by all this stuff he's coming across. Like that'd be interesting.
Here's a problem I had too, because there's a whole sequence where it's like Patrick Wilson is in the further, and you know his mind is being corrupted, and so all of these ghosts are coming into the house now through him as like this conduit. And so Rose Byrne is like shaking him and slapping him around, and you have this moment where it's like, you have to wake up, we're in danger. And it's like the problem with that is it's all these old people in Victorian clothes just slowly walking
it's
up
so
to the...
silly. Oh, we
Let's
haven't even talked about
figure out
It's so silly.
what
And
is the
I know what it is
danger
about
here.
James Wan and just like Victorian era kitsch. Like that's just his shorthand production
What?
value
No,
for
but like,
oh,
what
this
is
is
the
creepy.
what is
Look at
the
these puppets.
danger here?
I'm just
If
so
some
over these like
Victorian
Victorian
old
era
woman...
kitsch.
No, like,
Well,
if
here's the
some
thing. Like that
Victorian
worked for
old
The
woman
Conjuring.
is slowly lumbering towards you, I mean, just kick her down. What do we...
Yeah, just this even scary movie 3 where like the girl kicks the, the monster's ass. Like
No,
should be
it's like,
something
I
like
mean, it's an
This
old
this is
woman.
where the
She
parody
doesn't have
movie should have come in.
These ghosts don't have fangs. They don't have claws. They're not like zombies. They're just old people that are slowly meandering towards...
Well,
like,
here's the
I
thing.
never felt a sense of danger.
And that's something The Conjuring did well too, is that the spirits made sense of the stories they're connected to. Like The Conjuring 1, it's just the spirits of the couple that died in that house, the family that died in that house. So that's what the ghosts are, that's what they look like. And The Conjuring 2, like it was a Catholic family, so there's like the spirits of like these sadistic nuns, and the spirits of the crooked man, which was like a tale and apparently like I think like a creature in religious folklore if I'm not mistaken. Here it's like a hodgepodge of random creepy elements. Like here's a guy who looks like Darth Maul. Here's a fat guy with a creepy tongue that like tongue kisses Rose Byrne. Like it feels so. This kind of feels like a stepping stone to The Conjuring, where he's like he didn't really know what he was doing. He was just slapping all these elements together and hoping that something would stick.
Well, here's... I know we're probably running close on time, but here's one thing I will say to James Wan's credit. And I you know, there's been a couple of films that James Wan has made that I've really enjoyed, no matter how batshit or you know, whatever. But here's the thing that I will say in his defense. And Mark Kermode of the BBC actually brought this up in his, or was it him? I don't know. There was a film critic that I saw who was talking about James Wan. Don't quote me on who it was because I am tired. But but you know, the point was, it's like if you look at James Wan, he actually birthed two popular subgenres of horror that basically dominated the 2000s, mid 2000s, early 2010. Now, for better or worse, okay, because of Saw, there was tons of films that came out. There was Hostel, Vacancy, the Saw sequels, the Hostel sequels, like torture porn, someone getting tied to a chair and being tortured became this whole horror subgenre where it hadn't been before. And this kind of like haunted house, like PG-13 and very marketable horror film, where it's like, whoa, there's someone that popped up, and whoa, there's someone that popped up. And, you know, that was like, that led to The Conjuring, that led to, I mean, there's too many films to even list that kind of belong to that genre. And, you know, it's, those are not genres that I'm super crazy about myself. They're probably some of my least favorite genres of horror films. And I consider myself a massive horror fan. But for better or worse, there is something admirable for coming in as a Hollywood outsider and actually starting not one, but two trends in Hollywood and how we make horror films moving forward. It's kind of like how Quentin Tarantino came out and he made Pulp Fiction, and so now suddenly, you know, there's Boondock Saints, and you know, there's you know, Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead, and there's all these like things that are trying to cash in on this lightning in a bottle of it's a crime movie, but they're all witty and they're all like, you know, they have idiosyncratic dialogue and bursts of violence, and it's like, so I mean, either of those things really my thing? No, but it is incredibly cool that you could just come in and make that kind of like lightning in a bottle twice. And that's about the best thing that I can say about this
It's
film.
I think it's encouraging for young filmmakers because if James Wan can do it, you
Absolutely.
certainly can.
Yeah.
Nice. Well,
Should we?
I don't want to just
Yeah.
shit on this movie. Like it's well shot for the most part. There's some really great cinematography and
Mostly.
long takes. There's a couple of creepy moments. I actually think the seance scene was the creepiest part of the movie until the rave of cosplayers came in and it became unintentionally hilarious. But I don't know, man. I was just honestly pretty bored by this one. Like I couldn't care about anything that was happening, despite how hard the film was insisting that I should. And that just Drew, if you love this movie, you will love the Conjuring movies. Like you absolutely should check those out if you haven't. The Conjuring 2 might actually be my favorite film from James Wan. Like they're not perfect films by any means, but I think they have so much more heart, so much more consistency, and just better characters in general. So I strongly
Well, I
recommend
watched
those
The
movies.
Conjuring 1, and it was quite sincerely unsettling.
Yeah, the first one is pretty good. The second one I think is even better. You should
I
definitely check
didn't
that one
see
out.
the second one, so I will take your advice.
You
The
should
reason why I liked Insidious as much as I did is for all of, the very real comments you guys have made about this film. I'm quite fond of Canada's Wonderland Halloween Haunt. I actually
yeah.
have a real sweet tooth for some of these, suspenseful moments and jump scares, and I didn't find them nearly as cheap. I actually thought, for example, the first time we see Darth Maul in this film was actually quite surprising for me, and I enjoyed a lot about this. You guys have some very real points, though, I must admit. But for all of this movie's merits and flaws, I did have a good time watching this thing, and it's very interesting for me to hear you guys having some seemingly very different experiences.
Well,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I will say this, kind of going off of what Ian said, recommending The Conjuring. If you're looking for another Patrick Wilson horror movie, I would suggest Bone Tomahawk, which we talked about on the channel, but it starts out as a very run-of-the-mill, John Wayne kind of Western film for the modern age, Patrick Wilson and Kurt Russell, and then it is not that anymore. So that is all I will say. You should definitely check that out. Insidious. Man, do we have ratings?
4.5 out of 10. I'm sorry, Drew.
Ooh.
I can't
No,
get
you know what?
that.
But you know what, though? I hear where you're coming from, man. I do.
Yeah,
I'm
want
gonna
to
give
like
it I'm gonna give it a 6.66.
Nice.
That's a good
rating.
one.
I'm adding that in.
I'm I'll give this a 5 out of 10. There's a lot to like. I don't think I was the right audience for this. Maybe that's it. Wow, what a great episode.
Well, Drew, hang on, you gotta give your rating.
Drew.
Yeah.
Oh, don't worry about it. I'm echoing Devin. I actually like that one. This gets a 6.66 for me.
Sounds good.
Very nice. I'm sorry, I did not mean to cut you off, Drew.
That's totally fine.
Didn't
No,
mean
no,
to
no,
cut
no.
me off.
I didn't mean to. I am just super excited to make this announcement.
Go for it.
Because next week, this has been something that Devin and I have been working on.
Oh no!
It has been a secret for quite some time. This episode. So next week, October 20th, we're going to be reviewing 100 years of horror cinema. That's right. We're going to be talking about Nosferatu, 1922. Yep. We're going to be talking about Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, 1992. And really the timeless masterpiece for the next 100 years to come, Morbius, 2022.
It's
And
the evolution of vampire films.
oh yes, it's Morbin time. Next week. Thank you guys so much again. I am out of here. Morbius.
I thought it was gonna be
Uh,
something serious, like a new like vampire movie or something, not fucking Morbius. I don't know why I'm
It is a
surprised by that, but
serious
I am.
vampire
I
movie.
yeah,
It's a modern masterpiece.
it's modern
and we will be
Morbin
discussing
masterpiece. Oh holy fuck! I actually have Bram
a
Stoker's Dracula Blu-ray, so that's
Morbsterpiece,
good.
if you will.
Morbin time.
What should I
Vampin'
say?
Good night,
time.
everybody, and stay tuned for Conan.
And
one more thing.
yeah,
I mean, shout out credit to Aaron Kramers for the poster design on this
Yes.
episode.
Thank you so much for that, Aaron. I'm sorry I almost forgot. Won't happen again, buddy. Love you.
Yeah. And also stay tuned for not the next episode, but the one after that. That's his next poster design that he made for our Horror of the Hat episodes.
Fuck
But
yeah.
next week should be fun.
All right. Stay tuned for that, folks. And as always, is the first day yet? Have a good night, guys.